I do tend to work in projects, this one being the most ambitious, for sure. And eventually started, when I moved back into the South 10 years ago or so, I started working more directly from my Mississippi history. I was always fascinated by Natchez as a place, even as I rejected much of it. But Natchez was especially pathological in its ability to override reality with a fiction of itself. And the whole society of Natchez did that, and my family, being an old Natchez family, was very good at that. Deciding what it wanted its family myth to be, and then staying on that party line no matter what. One question that I always had from when I was a kid was what happened to my great-grandfather, who no one ever spoke about. I'd ask about him because he was a point of fascination by his absence, especially in a family who documented itself so thoroughly. I knew everybody, but there was one person who no one spoke about. And so, of course, just as a human in the world, but especially as an artist, you gravitate towards these, potentially unresolvable questions. Very meticulously, someone, I don't know if it was Ethel or someone else, had removed every reference to Dr. Smith so that there was almost no place where you could see him in any of her life, which I found to be deeply sad and disturbing. But also a point of curiosity, because I knew that there was no way that he could be completely erased. The conversation and the research and the collecting materials and organizing it all lasted for a good 2 or 3 years. It just happened that by the time the pandemic started at the beginning of 2020, I was at that tipping point where I had now had years of collecting information and organizing it into a chronology of Dr. Smith's life. And at that point, I needed to start painting. After I had had a couple of years and over 1,000 of these small paintings, I felt like I was finally equipped to start making something. There were a lot of factors that came together to make this giant piece. And I have been influenced a lot over the years by Sienese, 15th century Sienese narrative paintings. And so that was always in my head as an option of how this could become, a fully wrapping, almost chapel-like surrounding image. And where I started was in the middle of Dr. Smith's psychosis, which is when he disappeared from grandmother's life. It spread out from there. In one direction, it went to his birth, and the other direction, it went to his death. And the painting goes from his birth to his death. Just by the fact of it being as long as it is, you can't possibly take it all in one view. You have to move along it. While there's a sort of artifice with it that's, it crosses through years. There's a collapsing of time, almost an accordion of time, that is a sort of theme throughout, where time is not a fixed thing, and they're all sort of existing in that yard. Even today, they're still there. Ethel and Sarah Brandon. Ethel's parents, Gerard and Daisy. Ethel's little brother, Gerard. Ethel and her school friends. And he was only known in the album as Sam. It's disorienting if you don't, if you've got a painting that's so big that it stretches beyond your sight on either side, it's disorienting. You don't know exactly where you are or where to stop looking, And so that was part of the draw for me to make almost infinite compositions within the full piece, so that wherever you're standing, whatever you're looking at should be a self-contained composition itself. I was concerned about how I would survive for years doing a work that wouldn't be resolved for years. How do you live in the meantime, while you're making the work itself? And social media in a weird way is like as critical as one can be about Instagram and all of that. It became this unexpectedly supportive and positive feature of this whole project. What would have been a kind of private creative process became very public straight from the beginning. All of the creative process was laid out on Instagram as I was making it every single day. And I wouldn't have been able to make it if it weren't for the thousands of people around the world who were not only interested, but interested enough to buy the studies. And that support allowed me to be able to make this at all. When we're asking questions, it's like we want to get a definitive answer. And there are questions, as much as I've filled in of the mystery, there are very significant areas that there is nothing. There's no way to know what happened during this period. And at any point, his medical records could emerge, and I would then have a huge amount of more information about his life. But the magic of the grid is, at any point, I can pull out a section and rework that section. I could completely change a whole section. Conceivably, this painting could continue to evolve and evolve for decades.